that they would know, because that was the first day of school. Maybe she was absent that day, had a prayer meeting. I don't know. But I know it's a tough question. First Amendment, tough. She got religion and speech right. That's a start. Then obviously press and assembly missed the fifth one of the right to redress of government, the right of protest, the right to seek action from your government, which I found interesting. And look, I'm not going to beat up on her too much. Being on that hot seat, you don't remember everything. Something's going to slip your mind. Everyone has the Rick Perry moment. Things that you've spent your whole life wanting to do and talking about. That just in that moment, it's right there on the tip of the tongue. And it really was a trick question because it's only written right there. But there you go. So, yeah, big fun. And the reason that today was interesting and yesterday really interesting is she had Amy Coney Barrett talked a lot about standing. And for those of us who aren't lawyers, we don't get into all the legalese and all the talk. But I understand standing. If you're not the one who's injured by whatever's happened, you can't file a suit on it. Which is what the Supreme Court did Tuesday in rejecting a bunch of congressional members' suit accusing the president of violating the emoluments clause. They threw it out on the basis of standing, and I started thinking about it. And again, I'm not a constitutional scholar. I'm not a lawyer. I don't study this stuff, but it just seems like on a common sense level, the people who are in charge of the purse, our tax dollars, wouldn't they be kind of involved? Wouldn't there be some standing that the president's making money off of, our institutions for himself and not for we the people? It just seems like, if anyone would decide this case, it would be our U.S. Supreme Court, but evidently not. And there'll be even less going forward, especially if she's on the court. Less of a chance to hold him accountable for the kleptocracy that known as his administration. But anyway, that was the big fun. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the hearing today. There wasn't, for me, look, we know what it was. They're going to ram this through. The Democrats are talking about the horrible that's coming, and we know it. The ACA is going to be upended. Millions of people are going to lose their health care. Eventually, Roe versus Wade will be overturned, and it will end up back in the states. And there will be, struggle, and there will be pain, and there will be misery, and we get to relive history. And as I said yesterday, my daughters may have to endure the things that my mother's generation had to go through in respect to decisions with their body. Because as I've said from the beginning of this whole debacle, and going back years, it's not just about Roe. It's about Griswold. The idea that, because look how much of a stink the conservatives put up about including birth control with the Affordable Care Act, lost their ever-loving freaking minds. So if that were to come back, you now kind of got to wonder. Also, not a happy day today for Donald Trump. Evidently not thrilled with his boy Billy Barr. Because as we talked about yesterday, there was supposed to be right now, the October surprise was supposed to be all the Hillary email stuff, was supposed to be all of the Obama, the nefarious actions by Barack Obama in unmasking Carter Page and all of the people who had Russian ties. There was supposed to be, that was the smoking gun. That was it. It was a smoking cannon. They really had set the table, only to have their guy, who was investigating the unmasking, leave the Justice Department last week, wrap up his report, and nobody got arrested. There was no news. There wasn't even a couple of, hey, someone changed an email or someone spilled coffee on something. There was none of that, which I got to be honest, as much time and energy as they've put into looking for something, they could find nothing. Now, look, I've said Obama ran the White House pretty squeaky clean. I didn't think even that squeaky clean. Come on. They couldn't find an intern who threw something away by accident? Nothing? But evidently nothing. And that U.S. attorney left, moved on. They filed the report. It's evidently done. And now Trump is really ticked at Billy Barr because, according to him, according to Trump, there's tons of evidence. They have it. He can tell us. He can tell us there's tons of it. And he, as my daughter would say when she was a baby, they don't happy. Donald don't happy. And he hasn't committed to saying whether he's going to keep Billy Barr on if he gets reelected. Now, is that a veiled threat? Is that one of those things where you go, it's a veiled threat? Get in line, Billy, or you're going to lose your job. Start making stuff up. Because Obamagate was supposed to be something. Spygate, Unmaskgate. This was supposed to be huge. And their star, Durham, the U.S. attorney from Connecticut, he was supposed to be this. He was supposed to be the rock star who would just be, and all they got is a guy who changed an email. One arrest. That's it. Wow, that's it. And here I was expecting, at least a parade of minor, staffers and interns and people who had no idea what they were doing. Not like a general or anything who would lie to a vice president about, basically, trading out his country. Never mind anything as minor as that. I mean, it's really quite amazing. And while you've got that, all of this nefarious action that didn't actually happen, that they were really planning on, today you see something break that I gave it really no attention at first because it was the New York Post, and nobody takes the New York Post seriously. The New York Post is like the National Enquirer of news organizations. At least I think so. It's mostly joke kind. It's mostly joke kind of stories, and at least in my view, when I read them, it's all they try and over sensationalize and big bold headlines, not a lot of detail, but it's about grabbing your attention and shiny stuff. It's a newspaper for the cats, something to get the cat chasing the string. And I didn't bite on it early until a friend of mine texted me and said, "Hey, are you watching this?" And I said, "No, I haven't watched it." He goes, this is getting some credibility from news organizations where it shouldn't. Why are there mainstream outlets picking up this ridiculous story? And it's the story of this guy, we now know his name, John Paul Mac Isaac. And never trust somebody with 4 first names. Let's start there. But John Paul Mac Isaac, he's the owner of the Mac shop we now know in Delaware. Evidently, according to the Post and to Mr. Mac Isaac, or I guess it's just Mr. Isaac. I guess it's John Paul Mac Isaac. Anyway, John Paul Mac Isaac, John Luke and Paul and all the rest of them and Ringo and them. Evidently, someone dropped off a laptop at his laptop shop. Now, he I guess didn't know who it was, couldn't pick out who it was, but later came up with a receipt that said it was from Hunter Biden, had a phone number and email address, but couldn't pick him out. Assumed it may have been Hunter Biden's because there was a Beau Biden sticker on the laptop. Now, nobody picked it up, mind you. They just dropped off his expensive laptop and never came back for it. Never bothered to come back for it. And evidently, he decided that he was going to turn it over to the feds. And you go, I don't know, have you ever left anything at the dry cleaners? Do they turn that over to the police department? No. What made this guy go, hey, I've got this laptop, who I don't know who it is, because originally said didn't know who it was, but it's got this Beau Biden sticker on it. So I had a Bernie Sanders sticker on my laptop once. If I lost my laptop, would they turn it in and accuse Bernie Sanders of having my laptop? This is what we're led to believe. This is what the Post wants us to believe. And on that laptop is an email, a single email, one email that said that Hunter Biden set up a meeting, this nefarious meeting, this incredible meeting, this scandalous meeting with the executives from Burisma and the vice president of the United States. No idea what the meeting was about. No idea how long, where, what, how, any of that. That's the scandal. That's this one email. Now, I got a lot of problems with this. Other than the fact that there's a claim on there that there's a video of him smoking crack and paying hookers. We needed that. We needed the sensational part. And this is one of those things where, you got to have that. Because you got to get that shot in there that he has a drug problem. I have a couple of problems. One, who leaves their laptop there? Two, why did he copy a copy of the hard drive to be able to give to the lawyers of Rudy Giuliani? And how did he know to get it to the lawyers of Rudy Giuliani? He didn't know who the customer who dropped it off is, but he knows how to get to Rudy Giuliani? Very curious. Again, has no idea who dropped it off. Just somebody wrote the name Hunter Biden and an email address and a phone number. And Hunter never picked it up. They haven't proved it's his, but somehow it got subpoenaed in a grand jury. And that got me thinking, well, if it was surrendered, who would you subpoena for it? Because it's nobody's. It's nobody's. Who would you, again, not a lawyer, not sure who you would subpoena. So again, I read this story right from the beginning, and all of this stuff immediately popped out at me of just, the big BS, flashing lights, nonsense, ridiculous. This is just, this is a hit job. Probably the GRU sent some idiot in with a laptop and said, here, let's see if they're dumb enough to take this. And evidently there are some of us that are. Evidently, some of us want so badly, think the guy in the White House, to believe that Hunter Biden set up a bunch of meetings with Joe Biden and a bunch of nefarious stuff went on. Now, do I believe Hunter Biden used his father's name to get jobs he wasn't qualified for? Absolutely. Do I think Don Jr. and Eric and Ivanka did too? You bet your sweet bippy. Do I think every kid of somebody rich and famous has used their connections? Yeah, I think Donald Trump. Without the Trump name, he doesn't get anywhere near the meetings he got. So nepotism runs deep with this crowd. Am I okay with it? No, I'm not. But you can't point at Joe Biden and say, well, your kid did this, and not point at the other side and say your kid did it too. So for me, this is really a non-story. Unless they can put some there, there's no there. And I don't see a scandal. I know they really want to tie Joe Biden into some kind of weird scandal of firing the prosecutor that the international community wanted fired. I know that. That's not what happened. And no matter how many times you repeat it, it's still not going to make it true. And I know this is what you get from Republicans. I've spent my days talking with Trump voters these last couple of weeks, and they regurgitate ad nauseum the same talking points and the same things, even though you repeatedly go, no, here's the fact. Here's reality. You're wrong. Your talking point is wrong. Try a different one. Doesn't matter. They want to believe it. They so want to believe the worst about Joe Biden. And look, the reality is, even Lindsey Graham said, and Lindsey Graham could have had that John McCain moment and would have gained my respect. Because at one point, Lindsey Graham, there's a video of it, him saying, there's no better person in the Senate than Joe Biden. He's a good man. He's a good family man. He's a good American. He goes on for a couple minutes and actually does the Lindsey waterworks. Actually did got a little choked up, a little crying going on. And now you go, Lindsey, what do they got on you? Because it's not the same Lindsey Graham. And the reality is Joe Biden is a good man. We can have disagreements about his policy, but the number of times I've heard him called a pedophile, a socialist, someone who hates America, is just ridiculous. Especially when you look at the fact that you've got a guy who's in the White House who has admitted to sex crimes, has just never been held accountable. And and has done some of the worst things. But I guess we can forgive that because he's the Orange Menace. Anyway, I got lots to get to, lots to talk about today. When we come back and talk about jobs, can talk about trade policy, all that really super great stuff that Trump told me he was going to fix, but not quite. Right back.
On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1976. That was the day more than 1 million Canadian workers walked off the job in a day of protest. The Canadian Labour Congress called the general strike. Workers downed their tools against a 3-year wage control plan implemented by then Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. Trudeau had actually campaigned against wage controls during the 1974 election. A year later, the Liberal government introduced the C-73 anti-inflation bill. It was considered the worst attack on labor since the 1930s, when bargaining rights were first legalized. Trudeau's wage controls suspended collective bargaining rights for all workers and amounted to deep wage cuts. Public sector workers were hit the hardest, as many hospitals, schools, and municipal workers teetered on the edge of desperation from already low wages made worse. But for a day at least, many industries across Canada came to a screeching halt. Forestry, mining, and auto production all completely shut down. Many towns and cities were 100% on strike, even among the non-union workforce. St. John in New Brunswick, Sudbury, Ontario, Sept-Îles, Quebec, and Thompson in Manitoba were all cities where the strike was most successful. But elsewhere, the strike was uneven. Many public sector workers stayed on the job, while in cities like Vancouver, pickets successfully shut down bus service and newspaper deliveries. Most heralded the day of protest as a fierce show of power against a year's worth of wage controls. But others argued that one day of action was not enough. To combat the attacks on labor, any general strike would have to keep the country shut down until the program of wage controls was finally defeated. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I tell you, back in 2016, I listened to Trump's rhetoric. We're going to bring manufacturing back. We're going to make it in America. We're going to recreate that power of the 1950s. You know, I've talked about it before. I've gone through Trenton, New Jersey, and there's a bridge in Trenton that says, Trenton makes the world takes. And the reality is, for a very long time, that was the absolute truth. We were the powerhouse economy. We manufactured all kinds of stuff. And over the last 40 years, it's been going away. And, well, Donald Trump promised us he was going to be the guy. He alone was going to be the guy to stop that. The question is, has it worked? Have they brought jobs back as he claims? Are we flush with manufacturing, even if you account for the COVID? Well, here to share some thoughts on that, I've asked Sarah Anderson to come talk with us. She's the director of the Global Economy Project there at the Institute for Policy Studies. They've got a new study out, how trade policy failed U.S. workers and how to fix it. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Absolutely. It's great to be here.
So let's start right at the beginning. Trump told Ohio, they told Michigan, especially Ohio and Michigan, we're going to bring those auto jobs back. The good old days are coming back. It's happy times. Don't sell your house. Don't make any other plans. We're going to do it. And yet they didn't.
But he's still going back to those states and claiming he did, which must be so painful to hear, I would think, for all of the workers who listened to his promises 4 years ago when he was on the campaign trail, saying he was going to bring those jobs back, and so many thousands of U.S. manufacturing workers in those key Midwestern manufacturing, former manufacturing powerhouses. Like you said, it must be so painful for them after they've lost their jobs to hear him continuing to brag about his wonderful achievements. When if you just look at the raw numbers in Michigan, the auto industry as a whole, reduced their investment in that state by 29% over the course of Trump's period in office compared to the last 3 years of Obama's term. Their employment growth last year, so before the pandemic, was by far the lowest in a decade. And in Ohio, job growth also just plummeted. They had 36,000 new jobs in 2016. It was down to just 3,700 in 2019. And manufacturing wages have also fallen there. And so Trump is still trying to get people to believe that, all his tough talk on trade and his trade wars, that has been good for U.S. workers. And in reality, even before the terrible pandemic recession hit, he was not delivering for U.S. workers.
Yeah, I occasionally go back home to Cleveland. I grew up in Cleveland, and as you're traveling on Interstate 80, there's the giant Lordstown plant that
Right.
when I was a kid, was just teeming with cars, and it was all 3 shifts, always crowded, always packed. Empty. It's a ghost town now. And I know people who lost jobs because they're no longer delivering things or making things that go in there. It is really decimated northeastern Ohio.
Absolutely. I quoted a worker from that Lordstown plant outside Youngstown, Ohio, Chucky Dennison. He's a longtime General Motors worker. He believed the promises of Trump initially. He and his fiance both worked for General Motors. They invested in their dream home. Both of them lost their jobs. And he points out that Trump did not lift a finger to try to prevent those layoffs. I believe it was something like 14,000 in 4 different plants that GM did last year, as they're increasing their investments in China. So for all of Trump's demonizing of China, U.S. companies have been very eager to continue to invest in that very fast-growing country. In fact, U.S. companies invested $14 billion in China in 2019, and that was more than the year that Trump won the presidency in 2016. So, for all of his bluster and his claims that his really brute force approach to trade, he was going to rough up our trading partners and get them to take more U.S. products, and he was going to force companies to bring jobs back home. He just really hasn't delivered. If you look both at just the data and at the heartbreaking stories of people like Chucky Dennison, who lost his job there at the GM Lordstown plant.
Yeah, I go back to 2016, and I said, look, I agree with Donald Trump. I was not a supporter of his, but he, the blind squirrel found a nut. We've been losing manufacturing jobs. That prosperous working class that we once had, that was the envy of the world. That prosperous unionized working class has been eviscerated. Those jobs have gone, and I argue it's our trade policy. So he was singing, from the same hymnal that I was talking about. I'm in favor of tariffs. My problem is the way he used the tariffs were probably the dumbest way possible, because it was a go it alone strategy, and we knew that because Trump said, "I alone can do it. Only I can do it," and which meant none of the other countries were going to come with us. Nobody else was going to have our backs, and it left us vulnerable, and we saw the effects of that.
Absolutely. He jacked up tariffs on things like steel and aluminum, and surprise, surprise, our trading partners retaliated and put high tariffs on U.S. goods. And so that resulted in higher consumer prices here. Our farmers lost markets abroad. And by the way, he's been trying to buy off the farmers, who have been really hit hard by his trade war. And this year, the federal payments to farmers are expected to be $46 billion. That is a record. And here's the Republican Party is supposed to be all about free markets, and this is the kind of payments he's using to try to buy off farmers. Most farmers I know, I'm a former farm girl from Minnesota. They don't want to be on getting all of these subsidies from the federal government. They would rather be, making a decent livelihood on their own instead of having to rely on these payouts because of his very chaotic, not well thought through strategies on trade. And I agree with you, Rick. I've been working on trade a long time. Trade policy needs to be really shaken up. And so I have to say I was nodding along with Trump a little bit in those early years with his critique of it. His solutions have not, proved effective whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, tariffs aren't the panacea. They're one arrow in the quiver. There's a lot of tools we should be using. Stopping currency manipulation. Stopping intellectual property theft on a certain level. Personally, if you move to China and they steal your intellectual property, tough on you. You went there, you deserve it. That's my call. But he's right. We've got a major problem. He just hasn't fixed it, and he doesn't have any solutions. In fact, as you've pointed out, things have gotten exponentially worse. We just had the worst trade deficit that we've had in decades. Things are obviously going in the wrong direction. How do we change it? I mean, clearly Trump's boogered this up and in the worst way possible. We've never had probably worse relations with China than we have right now.
Right.
How do we move forward in this?
Yeah. Well, I'll mention a few things. One is that we need to recognize that there are huge incentives for U.S. corporations to continue to shift jobs abroad. One of those is the tax policy that Trump pushed through Congress, which actually gives an incentive to move operations abroad. You get to pay a lower tax rate than you do on your domestic profits if you have operations abroad. So we need to get rid of really perverse things like that. Companies also move abroad because they want to lower their labor costs, often by exploiting basic rights that are really human rights that should be respected for all workers in the world. Any U.S. company that's violating basic international labor rights overseas should face penalties here in the U.S. It shouldn't matter where those are occurring. It's really the companies that are playing off workers against each other, and we need to try to tackle that dynamic. But then I think more broadly, trade needs to be part of a larger coordinated national economic plan, and now is the best time ever to think about that as we're going to face the challenge of an economic recovery. We do need massive investment in things that are going to help position our economy better for the future, and do that with good job creation along the way. And so I'm really excited to hear some of the ideas people are putting out there about massive investment in research and development and, sustainable technologies and new ways to really increase demand here at home. Also using the power of the public purse, making sure that our government contracts are going to companies that are creating good jobs here at home. Those, good wages are going to make our economy stronger. It'll increase the domestic demand we need to really get back on our feet. So instead of just, fixating on beating up on China, I think there's a lot that we can do here domestically that could position ourselves to have a much healthier, more prosperous economy that's more with more equitable sharing of the gains of our economy, instead of just allowing it to go to the executives at these big corporations and other wealthy people.
No, I'm right there with you. The idea that that our economy should actually benefit we the people instead of the kind of race to the bottom economic development we've been doing for the last 40 years that have clearly benefited the very top of the economic ladder. The other thing that I would like to see is some scrutiny over foreign capital coming into the country. I mean, there are a lot of companies here in the U.S. that are U.S. in name only. They're owned by foreign corporations, and we have no idea who they are. And then they pack them up, box them up in the middle of the night, and then ship them back to wherever. At some point, don't you have to scrutinize what's being purchased in your backyard and the kind of investment that's going on? I mean, especially when you're talking about national security.
Well, I think we could be much tougher in the kind of conditions that we put on foreign investment. There are a lot of companies that have invested in the American South to take advantage of the lack of labor union power there, to take advantage of the workforce in the U.S. South. Many of these are from countries that have very strong worker protections and wage laws back home, from Germany, from Japan, all of these auto manufacturing, other kinds of manufacturing companies that have invested in Alabama and other places in the US South, they don't uphold those same good practices here that they do back home. Back home, they have all kinds of innovative things like apprentice programs to allow people to, learn skills on the job and really advance to higher levels. They should be doing that in places like Alabama, and we should say that that's a condition of investing there. All kinds of other, strong benefits packages and things that they enjoy back home. They are not bringing those good pro-worker practices to the U.S. South, and they're investing here for, because they get a lot of benefits out of it, and we should be putting tough conditions on foreign investors to make sure that those investments really benefit the local communities where they are operating.
Isn't that amazing? Because I hope people heard what you just said. There are other countries who bring jobs here because our conditions are extremely low compared to theirs. We make lower wages. We have less of voice on the job. We're now the country that is the giant sucking sound for other developing countries. We're in the middle of that race to the bottom. Now, clearly, some of those jobs continue on to Mexico and China. So
Mhm.
this tells me we're at a moment where we need something like a new Bretton Woods Accord. We need to, chuck the WTO and chuck the trade regime that we've built these last couple of years and redo this, because it ain't working for average everyday working people, not just here in the U.S. but in Germany and in the U.K. and even in China. I mean, it's not working for working people.
Absolutely. And we really need to recognize that it's not, those Chinese workers who are stealing our jobs. It's not Mexican workers stealing our jobs. It's really a set of rules that have been promoted by big corporations to serve their own interests so that they can play workers off against each other. And I love the idea of really a new international framework that would set much stronger protections for workers so that companies can't just play each other off against each other. Also, communities for around environmental issues, dumping toxic somewhere because they can get away with it, and shifting production of highly toxic industries to places that have weak environmental regulations. So we do need a whole different set of incentives for these big companies so that they're not just rigging the rules to allow them to make even more profits by shifting their production wherever they can get the lowest wages and the most lax environmental enforcement. That is just not, the way that our planet needs to go for the future. And I'm hoping, as horrible as the current crisis is, that it should really open people's eyes to who's really adding value to our economy, who are the essential workers who are making the products and producing the services that really the rest of us all rely on. It's not just the people in the corner executive office suites who are adding value. It's people on the front lines, people who are doing the hard work every day. And we need to come up with trade rules and other economic rules that really value that.
No, I'm right there with you. But for me, I would love to see the change in focus be from least restrictive trade barrier, which has brought us NAFTA and CAFTA and all of the other TAs, to something of domestic production for domestic consumption. We make what we can, we trade for what we can't make, and that be the trade model. Because look, every country can make T-shirts, every country can make tennis shoes, every country can do certain things. You make that for yourself, and you trade with other stuff. I think this race to the bottom of the least restrictive trade barrier and obviously the cheapest wage and most exploitable labor and environmental regulations, it's been a disaster for the planet and for us.
Absolutely, and I see a lot of potential for solidarity, not just across borders, but between working people and farmers. I was just talking to a farmer in Wisconsin the other day saying he doesn't want to have to rely on these foreign export markets, which are always going to be fickle and unpredictable. And he points to Canada, where they have a supply management process that helps them maintain stable prices, decent, pay, income for farmers, stable prices for producers and consumers of those products. And he pointed out, Canadian farmers are not dependent on government handouts right now, in the same way that U.S. farmers are, because of the disaster of the trade war. And so it's a system that's really focused on how do we ensure a decent livelihood for the people doing the hard work that puts food on our table,
Yep.
instead of how do we make more money for global corporations that are buying and selling around the world and producing around the world. And so it really is I think there's a lot of common ground there between the farm sector and the labor sector in our country about let's focus on what are the domestic needs, and how do we really value the efforts that people are making.
Good stuff. Sarah, I appreciate the time. Good stuff. Thanks so much.
All right.
Make sure you check out the report, How Trade Policy Failed U.S. Workers and How to Fix It. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1979. That was the day that the National March on Washington for Lesbian and Gay Rights took place in Washington, D.C. Estimates of marchers ranged from as few as 75,000 to as many as 200,000. The year of the march was significant. It marked the 10th anniversary of the police raid at the Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in New York's Greenwich Village. When police raided Stonewall, it sparked a series of protests that helped launch the modern LGBT rights movement. 10 years later, gay and lesbian Americans still faced significant employment and legal discrimination. Many also faced violence. The published program for the event included a tribute to Harvey Milk, the openly gay member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors who had been assassinated a year earlier. Lyrics to the song Harvey Milk's Body was written to the tune of John Brown's Body. The program also included an article urging march participants to lobby Capitol Hill for justice. A sample letter to Congress was printed as a template. It noted that many lesbian and gay men faced unjust discrimination in employment and called for change. The march organizers issued 5 demands. The second demand was that President Carter issue an order banning discrimination based on sexual orientation in the federal government, the military, and federally contracted private employment. The program included a list of organizations that supported the march. Not many labor unions endorsed, with a few notable exceptions, such as the Actors Equity Association, 3 AFSCME locals, and 1 American Federation of Teachers local. More demonstrations in Washington, D.C. followed. A march held in 1993 drew crowds estimated at 1 million, a powerful gathering for the movement to end LGBT discrimination.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, obviously, with the Supreme Court here, going on, obviously the confirmation, and it's coming. Amy Coney Barrett will be on the Supreme Court. She will be the vote, I believe, that's going to overturn Roe. You can kiss the ACA goodbye. All that stuff's gone, and I think it'll even go worse. As I've said for a long time, I think Griswold probably is going to be something that they start kind of squeezing down. So lots to consider. And I was happy to see today that more than 60 prosecutors and attorneys generals came out and signed a letter saying they will not criminalize abortion if Roe versus Wade is overturned. And one of those attorneys general, right here in Pennsylvania, our friend Josh Shapiro. So I'm very happy about that. But as I said, this is going to, once it happens, going to revert back to the states, which then means we need sane, rational people in the state legislature. And that's why I've asked Shauna Danielson to come talk with us. She's running for the PA State Senate in the 31st District. Shauna, thanks for taking time for us.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invitation.
So let's start right there first, because as I said, I think Roe's done, and I think it's going to revert back to the states. And right now, in this state, Republicans control both the House and the Senate. And I would argue the crazies have really taken over the Republican Party, who would want to criminalize a woman's right to choose and what she does with her body.
Yeah, and I think that's evident in a lot of the things they've been trying to do. There was that fetal remains bill where they wanted to require women who had miscarriages to have a funeral, like things that just are very clearly, it's like the cruelty's the point, right? And yeah, one of the many reasons why there are so many women running for office this year is because we're really tired of having our bodies and our healthcare decisions, basically at the fingertips of a bunch of men sitting around a table in the Capitol. So it's frustrating. I think when Justice Ginsburg passed away a few weeks ago, a small piece of every woman in America's soul passed away with her. And this whole thing is painful and uncomfortable to watch, but it just makes it so much more important that we get better people elected to state houses and state senates.
No, and that's why I think it's so important that you run. And I've been saying for a long time, I can't wait for women to take over, because I don't think they can screw it up any worse than we men have done.
Yeah, it's been hundreds of years of waiting our turn, and quite frankly, I think we're all about sick of that business. So you want to get some stuff done, you put moms in office.
There you go. So let's talk about you. Obviously, you're a music teacher. I gotta assume tired of being attacked at every turn for being a greedy, lazy teacher and all of that stuff. But what made you want to jump into this fishbowl and take this on, take the arrows that have been coming?
Yeah, so it was interesting. Actually, while I was in the classroom, I didn't feel that anti-teacher sentiment nearly as much as I feel it now as a candidate. We're attacked online quite frequently for like, oh, teachers are awful and you just want the worst. Whatever, it is what it is. But I just spent my entire teaching career basically in the shadows of the recession that I hit. I hit the job market in 2008, which is not a great time to be looking for a job, let alone one in public education, let alone one in the arts, which is always first on the chopping block anyway. So my entire career has just been kind of reeling from cuts. I started teaching, and then Corbett was elected governor, and $1 billion disappeared from the education budget in Pennsylvania. And that's very much shaped, the way that I really look at how we handle public education funding in the state. That was a big motivator for me. I also was a young teacher when the tragedy at Sandy Hook happened, and I've been through active shooter drills, and I've had to explain to kids that if someone were to break into school, Mrs. Danielson has to hide you in this closet, and I hope you're not at the bathroom because I can't open the door to let you back in. And just the trauma, and it's trauma from shootings, but it's trauma from poverty, and it's trauma from, just decades of having policies that really ignore the needs of working people. And it's not like running for office is super fun all the time. People can be pretty terrible when you put yourself out there, but it's just important to kind of separate out. I'm doing this because even if you think that I'm a crazy socialist, I still think you deserve healthcare. Even if you think that I'm out to grab all your guns, which I'm not because I don't want them, I still think you deserve to make a living wage. And so at a certain point, I tell people all the time, I look at my son, I looked at my students in my classroom, and I just knew there's so much more I could do for them in the state Senate than what I can just do from the confines of one room in one building. So
no, and
trudge on every day.
That's the great answer, because I was looking at your Twitter feed and some of your social media, and you're right. I mean, some of the ugliness that's been directed your way, especially by the state senator who's the incumbent, Regan, who I'm not a fan of, and I don't think many, to be honest, many sane people are, especially since I guess you just received the what is it, the Penn Lives endorsement, which is weird because they usually don't go against incumbents.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, the interviews, we did the interviews last week, and I didn't watch his live, but I did watch it back later on that day, and there were some very clear differences for sure between us. I stay laser focused no matter who I'm talking to, if it's a friendly audience or not. I stay laser focused on why I'm running, and that's to promote this agenda that really works for working families. And he denies that systemic racism exists in policing, and he said that his top priority was making sure we weren't too tough on cops because we don't want to have to hire less than ideal candidates. And I'm like, we are reeling from a global pandemic, a recession where there are just so many people out of work, and your top priority is not hurting someone's feelings when they apply for a job. So it was a very, I encourage people to watch those interviews so that you're not just taking my word for it.
Right.
Or, if it's coming from a newspaper, there will be that, oh, the liberal media. I don't think Penn Live is the liberal media. I've lived here for a while and I've never really gotten that sense. But I think we are very firm in what we believe in, and I'm really excited about the campaign we're running, and it was really affirming to get that endorsement today.
No, as I've said about our law enforcement, I support our law enforcement when they're not wrong. When they're wrong, you got to hold them accountable. Sorry, that's just how it is. And if that hurts someone's feelings, that we're going to hold you accountable for your actions. I guess I've lost what conservatism was ever all about, because it's generally conservatives who tell us how much they support law enforcement and how they respond.
Right. And I very much respect the job that law enforcement does in our communities. I know that when I was growing up, I was taught that the police are your friends, they're community helpers. And I know that I grew up in a very different place than a lot of people. And so one of the things I stressed was, we need to listen to folks in our community where that's not their experience. And we need to really validate those experiences and do better. I am a teacher. I have spent my whole career being told that we need to be evaluated on X, Y, and Z criteria. And I teach band, but somehow your score on your third grade reading test is going to determine my teacher rating at the end of the year. And so we're held to these very, very high standards. And I just think that everyone should be held to high standards.
I'm right there with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Shauna Danielson. She's running for PA State Senate in the 31st Senatorial District. Her website is shaunaforpa.org. We'll get links out on how you can take a look at that, see the issues that she's fighting for, and maybe throw her a couple of bucks, because these campaigns are extremely expensive. So, let me ask you, you said you're a music teacher. We've gone through some of this stuff. What's the issue I know you've said we want to make things better for working families. We want to raise wages and do all that. But what's that issue? What's that hill you die on? Because we all like to talk about compromise. We all like to talk about, hey, we can find common ground. Is there that issue that you go, there's no compromise, I die on this hill?
I think, I know the working families umbrella. I mean, it's everything, right? I want to go and I want to fight like crazy for everything. But the thing that is strongest in my background, that I'm most passionate about, of course, is fixing the way that we fund public education in this state. The fair funding formula exists. We only use it for new education spending. And I think we're all aware that there isn't a whole lot of new money going into education. So we really need to be transitioning to putting all of our education funding through that formula, so that our kids in York City and our kids in Philly and our kids in Pittsburgh are getting the same opportunities as our kids in Northern York County, or our kids in places that their schools have just been a lot more fortunate. I've taught in 3 districts in Pennsylvania. I taught in 2 right next door to each other, from Cumberland Valley to East Pennsboro, and the difference is stark. And they're right next door. Like, there are kids who they all have Mechanicsburg address, but the difference in what was afforded to them is just, it's crazy. And I think a lot of people don't realize just how varied those experiences are. And so, that fair funding formula is like the passion that drives me. That being said, we need to fix everything. This is a year where redistricting is on the agenda. We need to make sure there are people in office who are going to make that a fair process, because that impacts everything in our Commonwealth for the next 10 years. So that's another, very important issue to me.
Yeah, on the fair funding formula, I mean, it's something that I've been talking about for years, and I always get, people, who have this Hunger Games kind of mentality, that if we're going to give to them, that means you're taking from me. and I don't know how you get past that, because especially now with the pandemic and the state revenues going down into the tank, next year is going to be a real tough year. Because we're not going to have the revenue to do a lot of things in education and health and human services, and all of the things that you and I believe in are seriously going to be slashed if we don't get people like you sitting in those rooms of power fighting for them.
Right. And it's an issue of, budgets are moral documents, and we need to be making the investments in the things that are going to have the biggest return for us. And that's not speaking as a business person, right? But we know that when we invest in our kids, that they're going to need less money. There's a lower likelihood that they'll need special education services, and those costs are skyrocketing. There is just more opportunity for them in the workforce as they age. So we know that those investments more than pay for themselves. The other thing that we have to remember is, it's not so much I'm going to take the money from these schools in Bucks County and give it to these kids in Cameron County. That's not how this works. What we need to be thinking about is the state is not funding anywhere near the amount that it should be for our schools. We're something like 37% of education funding comes from the state. It used to be near 50%. So that's the money I'm talking about. And so school districts still have the ability to do what they want with their local property taxes. It's not like we're trying to say every district gets the same amount of money. It's every district will get what they need. And what kids in Cameron County, where there are fewer than 600 kids K-12, what they need is very different than Cumberland Valley, where there were like 800 first graders last year. It's a totally different world, but you do this based on need. And so that will be different everywhere. But the point is, the state has been completely neglecting its responsibility and paying less. And they love to brag about how they don't raise your taxes, but your municipalities and your school districts are raising your taxes to make up for it. So
Absolutely.
it's getting people to see the whole picture.
No, that's an excellent point, and one that has to be hammered time and time again, because I've had conversations with these legislators. Well, we've never raised taxes, and I'm going, my taxes keep going up just from somebody else. It just filters. You just force other people to do it, and this is where the state has completely shirked its responsibility, because it's a political ideology. It's this anti-tax fetish, because they all take the no tax pledge. Look, I want you to raise my taxes if it means my kids are going to have a better education, if my roads are going to get fixed, if people aren't going to go hungry, and if people aren't going to go unemployed without help. I just think that's part of being part of the community.
Well, and it's not so much even thinking like we're going to get in and raise everyone's taxes. It's we're going to prioritize your taxes so that they're going to help people. We're not going to give tax breaks to large corporations who don't need them. We're not going to defund the environmental agencies that keep our air and water clean. We're not going to slash the unemployment staffing so that when we have a crisis like what we had this year, we all see how that worked, because all of these agencies have just been cut and cut and cut. And we can't keep doing that just so that they can give tax breaks to their friends who fund their campaigns. Our campaign has over 2,300 unique donors. We have, let me look, like 3,500 unique contributions. Like, our campaign is being funded by real people, not by big corporations, not by, fossil fuel companies. Like, the difference is you're going to see it when people like me get elected, and we're governing, honestly, trying to do what's best for people, not what's best for the people who are going to cut us a $50,000 check so that we can get reelected. I'm not thinking about what happens 4 years from now. I'm thinking about how we get through these 4 years and come out stronger.
Yeah, I'm glad for that. Now let's talk about real quick about a couple of the attacks. Socialist, that gets slung. I've seen that a lot, and the gun grabber thing. Are you anti-gun? I mean, you gonna come grab everybody's gun out of their cabinet and take it away?
No, but I hear this a lot. I would like to end gun violence. I think me trying to take everyone's guns would actually increase gun violence, so I'm not real interested in that. But there are things we can do so that a 3-year-old doesn't get a gun out of their grandmother's glove box and accidentally shoot her. And this happens all the time in this country. We can talk about safe storage, and we can talk about emergency risk protection orders. So when someone is in crisis, there is an outlet for their friends or family to try and help them before they make a disastrous decision. I don't want to grab anyone's guns. Hunting and sport shooting is such an important part of our culture in Pennsylvania, and I'm not trying to change that, but I think we can be smart about it.
Yeah. Oh my God. All I heard from you was slippery slope. Slippery slope. You're talking about any bit of sanity, and we can't have that. Because I've said it too. If a 2-year-old gets your gun and shoot somebody, you should go to jail. I know it's a horrible tragedy for you, but you were negligent. If your
Right, and we
2-year-old would
wanna
have
talk
gotten in your
about
car and
personal.
crashed into it, you would be held
Mhm.
responsible.
Exactly. Personal responsibility,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Personal responsibility is the mantra of conservatives. And so that's all we want. We just want personal responsibility.
It-
And as for the socialism thing, my opponent sent out a fundraising letter in July, or maybe it was June. Like they probably had it printed before they even knew who was going to win my primary, saying I was a socialist. But a very dear friend of mine has this quote. I actually have it taped on my wall that anytime someone starts advocating for working class people, we're called socialists. So this isn't surprising. It was interesting to see the graphic he put out today with me and AOC and Bernie Sanders. And I was like, again, probably would have had this ready no matter who would have won my primary. But I'm not worrying about what my opponent is saying about me. I'm worrying about how I'm going to win this election and actually help the people who live in my district.
I'll tell you, I'd take that as a badge of honor, to be honest with you. I know Bernie Sanders, the first person I ever interviewed doing this show 15 years ago, and I love the guy. I think AOC is doing a good job fighting for working people, and I hope you'll do the same going into the Pennsylvania State Senate. Last question I've got for you. I'm a union guy. At the end of the day, I've been telling people, be afraid of 2022 because, chances are Pennsylvania's on the map to be a right to work state. So I got to ask, in the right to work debate, where do you find yourself?
I've been a PSEA member my entire career. I very much believe in the ability to organize. We need more people to be able to form a union. Right to work is not welcome in Pennsylvania, and I will fight back against that very strongly.
Terrific stuff. Shauna Danielson, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Hope people will check out your website, shauna4pa.org. We'll get it out on social media on how you can help donate, volunteer,
Yes, please.
and check out the issues. Shauna, I appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Great, good stuff. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1933. That was the day that the Executive Council of the American Federation of Labor decided to call for a boycott of Nazi Germany's goods and services. Jewish labor leaders in the United States led the push for the boycott. They were alarmed about the news coming from Germany since Adolf Hitler had taken over as chancellor that January. The day after the boycott decision, American Federation of Labor President William Green spoke with a reporter saying, "We found fresh justification for our action yesterday in today's announcement of Germany's withdrawal from the League of Nations and Disarmament Conference." In the months that followed the boycott, Jewish labor leaders continued to organize. In 1934, they formed the Jewish Labor Committee, a new organization headquartered in New York City. That year, the head of the Jewish Labor Committee, Baruch Charny-Valetic, addressed the convention of the American Federation of Labor in San Francisco. He urged for more union action. In response, the American Federation of Labor founded the Labor Chest. The fund was established to aid in refugees fleeing Nazi persecution. It was also to support public education about the rising threat of fascism. In 1936, the AFL's chairman of the Labor Chest, Matthew Wall, declared that the events in Germany, quote, concern us as deeply as the cause of labor, and that we shall spare no effort to help the victims of this regime. That same year, the Jewish Labor Committee organized a World Labor Athletic Carnival in New York City. The aim was to draw attention away from the Olympics that were being held in Nazi Germany. American Federation of Labor President William Green served as one of the honorary chairpersons for those games. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Some people who get elected to Congress grow in office. Others just bloat. Michael McCall is a bloater. A self-absorbed right-wing trumpeter, this Texas lawmaker is about the richest guy in the U.S. House, wallowing in some $113 million in personal wealth. McCall made his money the old-fashioned way. He married it. With his wife's inherited fortune, Michael decided to become a congressman, winning a grotesquely gerrymandered GOP district in 2004. Even by the low standards of Congress, McCall has been unaccomplished, unless you count championing tax breaks, regulatory favors, and corporate subsidies that have bloated his family's net worth by 940% since he's been in office. He's mostly known in Congress for his love of luxury living and for billing an unseemly number of those luxuries to us taxpayers. But here's an even starker measure of his character, his water meter. The McCalls live in a sprawling $7 million mansion in the scenic but arid hills of West Austin, where water conservation is an essential community ethic, unless you're a narcissistic politico. While the average Austin home uses 70,000 gallons of city water a year, McCall glugs down 1.5 million gallons, even winning Water Hog of the Year in 2017. Rather than cutting back, he has simply directed the city to stop revealing his actual usage. This is Jim Hightower saying, but he could be coming down for a splash landing. The district's demographics are rapidly changing. 60,000 more Latinx residents since 2012, for example. And Mike Siegel, a young civil rights champion, has rallied a popular grassroots uprising to pull into a tie with McCall. For workaday folks long disdained by the aloof incumbent, the sweet scent of comeuppance is in the fall air.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So to kind of follow up where we left off in the last segment with Shauna Danielson, and again, make sure you check out her website, shaunaforpa.org. I'm expecting next year to be really a tough year for Pennsylvania and for states all across the country, as tax revenues are going to plummet, and education funding is going to be under attack everywhere. And whoever the next president is seriously going to have to address that almost immediately. So for me, this is going to be a huge issue going forward. And here to share some thoughts on what that could look like, and if Biden-Harris campaign is talking about it at all. I've asked Mike Klonsky to come talk with us. He's a Chicago-based educator, writer, school community activist. He's got a blog, michaelklonsky.blogspot.com. He's written the most recent piece, "Education on the Brink, but Missing from Biden-Harris Speeches." Mike, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Rick. I love your show. I really liked your last guest, Ms. Danielson.
No, she's fantastic.
Really terrific, yeah.
I'm hoping she will be my state senator and get rid of the person that is there right now. But she brings up an interesting point that we're not funding education here in Pennsylvania at levels for some that we should, and there should be some fair funding formulas. But we're just one state. This is duplicated across many states.
Yes, absolutely. That's a huge problem, and so a lot of the funding that is available has been shifted away from public schools to private and vouchers and privately run charter schools.
Right, especially under billionaire Betsy DeVos as the Secretary of Education. We've seen that happen a lot, but we also saw it under Barack Obama's administration with Arne Duncan as the Secretary of Labor.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I would say that Arne Duncan and his crew at the Department of Education really set the table for DeVos with their Race to the Top initiative, which kind of held schools hostage for money. The Duncan administration, I should say the Obama administration, but with Duncan running the department, they used federal funding as kind of a leverage point to force school districts to close schools, to fire teachers, and to replace neighborhood schools with privately run charters. So that to me, that was kind of a forerunner to what DeVos is doing now, except she's done it cubed, or
yeah.
To a much higher degree.
And you could also argue that the reality is George W. Bush set the table for the Obama administration as well,
exactly,
with no child behind draft.
Absolutely, but I'm still going all out for Biden and Harris. And one of the big reasons I am is to send Betsy DeVos packing. I think if nothing else, and there's a lot else, of course, but if nothing else, that would be a great victory to get her out of there.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I would love to see her go. But are you afraid, as kind of I am? And look, I'm wholeheartedly, enthusiastically, I voted for Joe Biden. My ballot's already in. They gave me the confirmation they got it already cast. But are you concerned, as some, that Biden may appoint a Duncan type, and that we get less bad?
I kind of expect that to happen, even though, as I pointed out in my blog piece, the Democratic Party platform, which we fought for back in in 2016, is not a bad statement on education. But the problem, from my perspective, is that the Democrats now, Biden and Harris, see their main partner in coalition being being Republicans. It's kind of a right-center coalition, and as a result, their position on education is not that much different from the Republicans. And so I think that's one of the reasons why education issues are not being brought up. They're not being talked about in the campaign. They're missing from all the debates. You can hardly find a word. I take all the transcripts from the debates and put in education or schooling, and there's nothing that comes up.
Well, there's only been 2 debates, and one of them, I don't know how you got any transcript out of the presidential debate. It was just yelling at each other.
I know, but
it was just Trump interrupting and causing noise.
Yes, exactly.
But I get
anyway,
your point.
Yeah, that's one problem. And in other words, if you can't, well, the other problem, of course, is that Trump controls the agenda all the time, and so he doesn't want to talk about issues. He wants to talk about, socialism or, all these.
Well, he's got his distraction.
Yes,
sure. But here's the question I have for you, because
okay.
I get this thrown at me a lot. The African American community has bought into charters. I know a couple of state representatives here in Pennsylvania who are getting big money from the charter people because they've been sold the only chance that inner city kids have of getting any kind of education is to get these charter schools and the vouchers and all of this stuff. So the Democrats are kind of in this weird spot of a large voting block for them is the African American community, who sees this as their kids' last and only opportunity to get an education.
Well,
how do you argue that?
Well, one thing is, you're talking about the black community as if it's one monolith. The NAACP certainly has come out strongly in opposition to privately run charters. The unions have been opposed to charters, and the Democratic platform is very critical of charter schools. So I wouldn't just say that the black community favors charters. Of course, there are some people who, many parents, I would say, who are in such a bad situation in terms of the defunding of schools and segregation that a charter school might provide a better alternative for them, and I'm all for it if it is.
And the reason I bring this up, the reason I bring it up is, the conversation I had with Ms. Danielson is, the education funding formula in this state is so screwed up, and there are special cutouts for charter schools in the educational, the EITC, the educational investment tax credit that businesses can get tax breaks for giving money to different schools. They've set up a system that I think gives priority to private schools and to charter schools and the cyber charters and the rest of them over your local public school.
No, you're absolutely right. But I'm not really an anti-charter guy in that sense. Our small schools workshop here in Chicago helped create the first 6 or 7 charter schools back in the early 2000s or mid 90s, and of course, what happened in those days, the charter schools that were created were created by teachers and by union teachers. But that early charter movement was hijacked. It was taken over by corporatists and privateers.
No, I'm with you. I'm not against the concept. I'm
Yeah.
against what they've turned into.
I mean, absolutely. And so, but that's been DeVos's go-to, and it was with Duncan too. So yeah, even hopefully, even after to speak to your earlier point, after Duncan and Harris are elected, we're still going to have a struggle around education issues. It's going to be ongoing, and it's going to be fierce, and we're going to have to fight for. Even though it's supposedly in the Democratic Party platform, we're still going to have to fight for it to get implemented. Fair funding for education, an end to standardized testing, an end to this privatization and segregation. We have to turn that all around, and vouchers. And here in this city, we had a Democratic mayor who brought in school vouchers. So, it's one thing to have some nice words in your platform. It's another thing to do the right thing, and that's going to require the movement from below to continue as it did during all those years. During the Duncan years, you had the opt-out movement by parents, thousands of parents.
Of which we were one.
Yeah. And anyway, that's going to have to continue. A Democratic victory, hopefully, not just in the White House, but down ticket with people like Ms. Danielson. We're still going to have a fight from below, and it's going to be a fight to save teacher unions and to fight for safe conditions for teachers during this pandemic. I mean, look, this pandemic has been played havoc on public education.
Yeah.
And
And my fear is everything moves the cyber charters and online, and to me that's a real problem.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
I agree 100%.
So the last question I've got for you, because obviously I want Joe Biden to do the best he can. How do you influence him? How do you push in the direction of saving local public schools? Because Joe seems like a small town guy to me. Seems like a guy that would be on the side of your local public school, being part of the community, and that image of community schooling that I so much like.
Well, part of the problem is that the Democratic Party leadership is trying to push people like us away. They're in order to pull this center-right coalition together, they've got to distance themselves from people like Bernie Sanders or AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and people like that. But AOC and the squad and Bernie won't let them off the hook like that. I mean, they keep pushing, and they're going into the party and trying to fight for the soul of the Democratic Party. And on education issues, people are going in and trying to shape the platform and trying to push the party to a decent position and decent practice. And I think that's got to be done from below too, and led by teachers and teacher unions.
And also parents.
And parents. Yeah, we got to build that kind of a coalition. We got to use coalition politics. And unfortunately, a lot of my friends, even on the left here in this city, they won't touch Democratic Party politics. They think it'll stain them, or something like that. But I don't think that's a very progressive position.
Going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But Mike, I appreciate the time. Hope people will take a look at your article. We'll get links out on social media on how they can do that and share some thoughts. But
Great.
I appreciate
Thanks
the
for
time,
having me,
Mike.
Rick. Okay.
Good stuff. Make sure you check out the site education, MikeKlonsky.blogspot.com. Education on the Brink. That's the article. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1976. That was the day more than 1 million Canadian workers walked off the job in a day of protest. The Canadian Labour Congress called the general strike. Workers downed their tools against a 3-year wage control plan implemented by then Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. Trudeau had actually campaigned against wage controls during the 1974 election. A year later, the Liberal government introduced the C-73 anti-inflation bill. It was considered the worst attack on labor since the 1930s, when bargaining rights were first legalized. Trudeau's wage controls suspended collective bargaining rights for all workers and amounted to deep wage cuts. Public sector workers were hit the hardest, as many hospitals, schools, and municipal workers teetered on the edge of desperation from already low wages made worse. But for a day at least, many industries across Canada came to a screeching halt. Forestry, mining, and auto production all completely shut down. Many towns and cities were 100% on strike, even among the non-union workforce. St. John in New Brunswick, Sudbury, Ontario, Sept-Îles, Quebec, and Thompson in Manitoba were all cities where the strike was most successful. But elsewhere, the strike was uneven. Many public sector workers stayed on the job, while in cities like Vancouver, pickets successfully shut down bus service and newspaper deliveries. Most heralded the day of protest as a fierce show of power against a year's worth of wage controls. But others argued that one day of action was not enough. To combat the attacks on labor, any general strike would have to keep the country shut down until the program of wage controls was finally defeated. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I had this great conversation this afternoon that just left me, I shouldn't say great. I had this amusing conversation. Borderline insane. But the person I was talking to was angry that the state of Pennsylvania during the height of the pandemic shut down. That they can't open restaurants and that they can't, pack people in like sardines, again, the sports bars and that kind of stuff, because, everyone's afraid of this virus. And he again, made the argument that I've heard so many right-wing people make, because they've been listening to too much Fox, too much right-wing talk radio. This idea that herd immunity, we're just gonna have to power through this. That, it's not a big deal. We're just gonna have to live with it. And he said, if another 100,000 people die from it, well, that's another 100,000 people. And I just said, wow, I guess that's okay if I'm not one of those 100,000 people. How about you? Would you like to volunteer for that? Of course he was. No, I'm young and I'm strong enough. I'll power through it. I'm in good health. It's just those people. And he so wanted to make the argument that we need to get rid of the weak, because he so wanted to, but he knew I knew his name. That's the only thing I can think of. And we went round and around a little bit, and eventually I said, oh, okay, that's great. Thanks, nice talking to you. I got to move along now, but good on you, brother. And I got an email from a friend, a listener, who kind of laid it out much better than I could have. Obviously, he knows math better than I do. I did okay in math. When it comes to money and that stuff, I was really good at it. As a street kid, you learn money. The other stuff, not so much. But my friend Joe points out that this idea of herd immunity has a couple of problems. There are a couple of things in there that we might want to consider when we go, well, we should just all get it, and we'll have herd immunity, and it'll be okay. As he points out, you need to get to somewhere about 70% of the population to get it. We're about almost 8 million people now, maybe a little over 8 million people who have gotten it, which isn't a huge number. Look, we're a country of 330 million people. 8 of the 330 got it. And I've had people go, wow, it's not a big deal. Only 8 Only 8 of the 330 million got it. Only 8 million of the 330. And you go, yeah, but what happens when it explodes? Because 8 million people have got it. We've got, 215,000 people dead. Well, my friend Joe did the math for me. Of the 330 million people, to get 70% of the people to get it at a death rate of about 2.4%, which is what they're saying it is, you're not looking at another 100,000 people dying. You're not looking at 300,000 or 400,000. You're looking at 5.6 million people. And let that sink in for a second. You're talking about 5.6 million people. That's the population of more than a number of states have. It's almost half of what Pennsylvania is. So there's people who go, well, we just got to power through it, because this is what we're going to have to live through. Understand, it's going to bump up. The question is how do we react in the coming days? My fear has always been that Trump was going to just send the message, we got to power through. And now that he's had it, now that I guess Barron's had it and Melania's had it, and now I guess Nick Saban's got it, and nobody has any symptoms. They're fine. They're according to Trump, he's never been better. COVID made him stronger. It was actually the steroids that did that, but I digress. And look, healthy people are going to be okay. I mean, chances are, 97.6% of the people who get it will be just fine. The question is who's willing to stand up and say, I'll be one of the 5.6 million. Now, this is going to affect not just us, but globally. We're seeing a rise in a number of other countries who are setting curfews, who are doing things to try and control it. But ultimately, and I keep coming back to this moment, I wish, because I listened to my conservative friend who said, it's my choice. I wish people were somewhat smart enough to do what we need to do. I wish we could take the personal responsibility. But sadly, there are too many who just think, man, I don't care. I don't care about you. I clearly don't care about you because I don't care about myself. And this is why you need government action. Now, with all the court rulings that have been going on, I guess one in Wisconsin here was reported on today. They're not going to allow the governor to limit the size of meetings people can have, or limit the size of gatherings, because we're smart enough to not have 1,000-person rallies. Oh, wait a minute. We're not smart enough because we're having 5,000-person rallies. We've got a president running around who had it, claims he had it, and now completely immune, can't get it again, wants to go in the crowd and hug and kiss everybody. And yet we now find out that there's a possibility of being reinfected. There's all of this stuff we don't know, and this is why you don't have stupid leaders. And look, my fear is, and I've said this from the very start, 2.4% isn't that big a deal. We could lose 5.6 million people. That's all right, as long as it's not me. But we're going to crush our healthcare facilities. We are literally going to crush the capacity of our healthcare system to deal with anything. And that's always been the fear. That's always been the problem. And then once you have this massive number of people being infected, as we're starting to see things tick up, and I go back to I saw this infograph where it kind of just showed you got a couple hundred here, a couple hundred here, a couple thousand, boom, 20, 50,000. And it just explodes. And then you crush your ability to deal with it. And then that 2.4% fatality rate, because you're treating some people, they're getting some care, they're getting access to ventilators, they're getting access to drugs. Once it explodes, you don't get that. So that 2.4 number could possibly go up. And that's one of the scary parts of all this to me. Because, we're saying these people are our heroes, our frontline heroes, essential. And yet we're going to put them in a situation to where either they get sick and bad things possibly happen, or they just get burnt out and they leave, which leaves all of us much more vulnerable because we don't have the mental capacity to care for people. We have a massive brain drain. This is all bad. And I'm not one of those people who, hair on fire, the sky's falling, oh my God, it's the end of the world. It, to me, makes perfect common sense. Don't get it. Stay away from each other. A little social distancing. Wash your hands, do all that stuff. Wear the mask when you're around other people. Absolutely. Without question. But, I guess we're going to see come the next couple of months. My fear, as I said earlier, my fear is Donald Trump is still the president, and we're still, even as things explode, still poo-pooing it away. As we're now finding out, evidently there were some texts that show that they knew how bad it was. And look, you don't need texts or emails or recordings from Bob Woodward to tell you this guy didn't take it seriously from the beginning. The buck didn't stop on his desk. No buck stops on his desk. It goes into his pocket, but doesn't stop at the desk. He's not responsible for anything. Just ask him. He'll tell you. I'll take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney is going to be here to share some thoughts on the top news of the day. Right back after this.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Hurricane Delta is the 10th named storm to make landfall this year. Hurricane season has nearly 2 months to go. Climate change? What climate change?
Cleanup and recovery begin in battered Louisiana in wake of Hurricane Delta. Plus,
let's talk about who is prepared to lead our country over the course of the next 4 years on what is an existential threat.
Climate change in the spotlight at the one and only 2020 vice presidential debate.
Yay!
And that's not saying much.
Boo! All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
On the subject of climate change, Pence made another hollow promise.
We're going to take care of our environment and follow the science.
We will follow it, and once it is asleep, we will smother it with a pillow. It will look like an accident, this much I swear.
No swearing, Mike. This is your Green News Report. Hey, Desi Doyen.
Yes.
At the vice presidential debate, not only did they bring up climate change, but they brought it up in like the first half hour or so. You got to be happy about that.
Well, yes, it's true that the vice presidential debate had a solid 7 minutes about climate change, but it was not an actual substantive debate on either climate change or policy. So, yeah, no, not really.
Nothing is ever good enough for you people, is it?
It can be way better.
Uh-huh.
But first,
okay,
recovery and cleanup operations are underway in beleaguered, storm-weary Louisiana in the wake of the destructive Hurricane Delta, which slammed into the state on Friday night as a Category 2 hurricane near Lake Charles. Delta hit just a few miles from where Hurricane Laura made landfall just 6 weeks ago, stripping off blue tarps from damaged homes. 3 deaths are linked to the storm. The Washington Post reports that ravaged municipalities are still awaiting word from FEMA on whether they will receive full reimbursement for costs incurred during these 2 hurricanes and how much federal aid they can count on. Delta was the first Greek-named storm to hit the U.S. in recorded history and the 4th to strike Louisiana in 2020.
And why was it a Greek-named storm?
Because we ran out of English-named storms, and now we're into the Greek alphabet.
Cool. What happens after the Greek alphabet?
Armageddon?
Yeah.
Driven by record warm ocean temperatures, Delta broke the record for the fastest intensifying storm in the Atlantic basin. Climate scientists say man-made climate change is increasing the intensity and the frequency of the most dangerous hurricanes. So keep those facts in mind as you hear Republican Vice President Mike Pence at the sole vice presidential debate of the 2020 election held last week in Utah deflect questions about climate science and lie about policy. Moderator Susan Page of USA Today did not ask Pence about the Trump administration's persistent denial of the scientific consensus on climate change. She did not ask about the administration's rollbacks of more than 100 pollution and climate regulations or about Trump's lack of any climate policy. Instead, she went retro to ask Pence if he believed the scientific community.
The climate is changing, but the issue is, what's the cause and what do we do about it? President Trump has made it clear that we're going to continue to listen to the science.
Mike Pence, partying like it's 1999.
Scientists, of course, know what causes climate change, and we know what to do about it, but voters did not hear those solutions. Throughout the debate, Pence ignored questions and instead pivoted to repetitive talking points, invoking the Green New Deal 11 times as if it were a mantra, even on unrelated topics. And he flat out lied about Joe Biden's position on fracking. Senator Kamala Harris defended Biden's positions.
I will repeat, and the American people know, that Joe Biden will not ban fracking. That is a fact.
That is a fact because a president can't ban fracking. Only Congress can do that. But a president can regulate it, which Biden has pledged to do. Also, banning fracking isn't really the point. No one banned coal mining, but it is going away anyway because of market forces. Harris then linked Trump's dismissal of climate science to his failed response to the pandemic that has killed more than 210,000 Americans.
We have seen a pattern with this administration, which is they don't believe in science. And Joe's plan is about saying we're going to deal with it, but we're also going to create jobs.
Senator Harris missed an opportunity to detail Biden's $2 trillion plan to create jobs by transitioning the nation to clean energy, or how it differs from the proposed Green New Deal framework. Polling is extremely consistent that voters overwhelmingly favor climate action, and they do not trust Trump and Republicans to do anything on climate policy. It's unclear if voters understand that Trump and Pence have no plans to address climate change, and with the corporate media still stuck at square one asking candidates about their beliefs, voters are still not getting the substantive climate policy discussion they need and deserve.
Is that it?
That's it.
That was very good.
Okay.
It was like watching the vice presidential debate all over again, except without all of the boring parts and, of course, without the fly. Other than that, nice job. For much more on these stories and the ones we couldn't get to because of them, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So a municipal worker in Florida was suspended because he was flying a Trump flag on his municipal vehicle, which you got to know if you're like a county worker or a state worker, or if you work for a government entity, you can't do that in your official capacity. Look, if you want to put it on your car, you knock yourself right out. But while you're part of the government structure, you just don't do it. Personally, I'm surprised he only got 5 days. I bet you if it had been a Biden flag, they'd have fired him because it's Florida after all. But here to share some thoughts on, the big news of the day, a Supreme Court justice who doesn't quite know all of the parts of the First Amendment. I've asked our good friend, former Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney to come share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks, Rick.
Am I being harsh on Amy Coney Barrett because she didn't know all of the things of the First Amendment? Is that too harsh?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask me about the municipal worker. I don't like to be harsh on municipal workers.
We can do that if you want. We can start right there. Let's beat up on the municipal worker first.
Poor guy. I mean, I don't care which flag he's got, but but today's world, hey, you got to watch too. As far as of her knowledge, it's kind of surprising, lack of knowledge.
she was on the spot. Someone asked her a question she wasn't ready for. I mean, because that was kind of one of those. I'm going, wow, where'd that come from? I don't think I've ever heard that one before. That was really a trick question.
Well, yeah, and it happens. I mean, it happens during hearings. People think up things, but I guess because she's running for the Supreme Court,
yep.
People are expecting you better know it all. But obviously, some things that people won't know that maybe you would think they would know.
Yeah, I was really hoping she would say "oops," like Rick Perry did. I was hoping for a Rick Perry moment. Because look, his whole life he wanted to destroy, the Department of Energy and Department of Labor, and go down the list, all these places he wants to destroy, and to have Ron Paul stand there and throw out names of all the places he wants to destroy, to get him to hopefully jog his memory, I was hoping for that.
Right. Yeah, she was unable to name the 5 freedoms protected by the First Amendment, and like I said, I think a lot of people maybe couldn't do that because she's up there and what she's doing. Obviously they wanted to see how much knowledge she actually had. It's just like when I've done debates over the years with opponents, and they asked you during the debates all of a sudden, how much is a gallon of milk?
Yeah.
And they did that to me and an opponent, and my opponent happened to be he was a state senator, as I was, but he was single, and I had 2 kids, and I grocery shop, and so I knew, and he had no idea, but that didn't sort of mean he was too rich or anything. He was on the spot, and I was shocked when they just did that little thing, let alone if they asked me to name the 5 freedoms.
I couldn't tell you. I haven't bought a gallon of milk in 20 years.
Right.
My wife does the grocery shopping. I'd guess like $5 a gallon. That'd be my guess. Okay, throw arrows at me because I actually don't know. But like you said, you're on the spot. Sometimes it just doesn't recall, which I thought was it gave something interesting to talk about out of this hearing. Because to be honest, do we need all these days of this? Because we already know what we know. We know she's not going to say anything. She's not going to answer any hypotheticals. We know that the Republicans are putting her on there because she's going to destroy Roe and the ACA. And the Democrats know it too. So they're just saying, hey, look, this is going to be horrible. Do we need this? Can we just go? Because I didn't watch any of it today. Can we just get past it now?
I just watched clips, on Google.
Yeah.
Because, again, I thought that what the Democrats did yesterday, I thought was smart, which was to bring out issues to be able to talk about, even talk around her about the Affordable Health Care Act, et cetera. And then the whole key here, and I knew this, and everybody else knew it, was the Republicans would try to bring up the Feinstein comment of years back, which was about religion. And even though the Democrats didn't bring it up, the Republicans said, so you're after her religion, huh? So, I mean, we knew where that was going.
Right.
But you're right. In fact, I guess I was surprised at 4 days. I even thought, would they stretch it out any longer than that? But no need to. It's done. And so it's a matter of getting through this without anybody making a huge gaffe or, quote, picking on her unfairly, so that it becomes a story.
I wish someone would ask her about the Second Amendment and what that, if she knew what that is. And she couldn't quite know the first. How about the second or the third?
Right. Yeah.
And I know I'm being very harsh on her. I'm sure she's a brilliant legal scholar, but I see her as an ideologue who is a brilliant legal scholar. And for me, that's a problem. But like I said, it's going to happen. I think the Democrats did a nice job, as you said, of highlighting what she's going to do, so that when she does it, we can go back and say, "We told you so," and this is why we're going to add 3 justices to the court.
Well, also there will be speeches at dinners, both parties, from here on out. Remember what happened in 2020. This is why you need the Senate. Because sometimes with the presidency too, it's hard to focus the political activists out in America, the grassroots people, that, hey, the Senate is a pretty big deal almost sometimes even as big a deal as the presidency.
No, 3.5
Yeah.
years ago, I said that, and I took a lot of flack for it. I said I would gladly have Trump as president if we could have the Senate. I think I've told you this. I said I think the reality is Trump will sign anything you put in front of it. He just wants to have a little party. He wants people to talk nice about him, and he wants praise and accolades. I don't think he cares ideologically one way or another. I think it's just what's going to get him the biggest pat on the back. And if Democrats put things in front of him that they want, I believe he'd sign it. And if you hold the Senate, you stop all this horrible stuff. And maybe and look, this is where I'm even at this point. I want Trump out, but I want the Senate more. Because I want to go back to the old days where if you went to the minority party and said, hey, are there people that for the Supreme Court, are there people that you're okay with, so that we can get a substantial number of people. I forget who it was who was talking about, I think it was Sass who was talking about, we used to get 80 or 90 people to agree on a Supreme Court justice. And I go, yeah, that's because there was actually some input from the minority, as I remember. Merrick Garland was chosen because I think it was Orrin Hatch who said that well, if they put Merrick Garland up, we'd confirm him in a heartbeat, and they didn't even give him a hearing.
Right.
So that's where my thought is, and that's where that goes. I did want to get your thought on the biggest scandal of the day. I'm not sure if you saw the New York Post article today. Did you happen to check that out?
No, which one is that?
Hunter Biden evidently left a laptop at a laptop store somewhere in Delaware. And it had an email on there that said that Hunter set up a meeting with his Burisma executives and the vice president, Joe Biden. And also there was the video of him doing, it was either meth or crack, or if they're the same thing, and having sex with a hooker. So there is that. And of course, the scandalous email. I love your reaction. Yeah, well.
Well, the drug part, look, I've been to rehab. A lot of families in this country have people that have struggled with drugs and alcohol, and so I think the fact that he has recovered, and the fact of the way Joe Biden said it, I think resonated in a positive way. You know, so I really don't. I don't. If there's the drug part of it or the woman, I don't see that as a great big shocking thing.
No.
I guess that the part about the fact that the fact that the repairman gave it to Giuliani, didn't he?
He gave it to a lawyer who got it to Giuliani. He copied a copy of the hard drive, which I'm going, that's interesting. You handed it over to the FBI, but you got a copy for yourself, who somehow you got into the hands of Giuliani. You didn't know who it was, but you said it was Hunter Biden's because a Beau Biden sticker was on top of it. But you had a receipt with Hunter Biden's name and email, but you couldn't pick him out as the customer who dropped it off. There's just a lot of curious stuff. And the fact that, to be honest, the fact that it was broken by the New York Post throws up huge red flags for me.
Right. But yeah, because they were claiming the Post was claiming that they held a meeting with a Burisma figure or holdings figure or something, a Ukrainian energy company or something. I would want to see the emails, that they would have. But I guess too that I did not know that if you take your computer somewhere that they can go through it. And now, if it
looking
has
for child porn
on it, sure, that's an instant. But I would assume that you just can't, being a computer company, you just can't take somebody's computer, sift through it, I don't care who it is, and say, okay, I think I'll just, give this to somebody that'll give it to Rudy Giuliani or,
Yeah, I mean, it stinks to me. It stinks to me that he doesn't know who it was, but there was a Beau Biden sticker. It just seemed like there was so much that was circumstantial that, was it really his laptop? I mean, come on. who takes an expensive laptop, drops it off, and then doesn't bother to pick it up? Especially if you know you've got emails on there that are tying you to the biggest scandal that could take down your father's presidency, and of course the images of you with the hooker and doing illegal drugs. It just seems to me, it just seems fake to me.
I mean, it does seem fake. It's just like when the information came out on Trump, and I told a lot of people about the dossier, about the sexy, spicy part of the dossier of Trump on a bed in Moscow. I never believed that, that actually happened. They added something into that story that really, energized it, because that's what you do in politics. And this is the same thing. They've added something into a story that you don't know if that was Hunter Biden's, and if it was his, I mean, I can't imagine where you just would hand your laptop if you're Hunter Biden or anybody.
Right.
You hand it to a computer store during the election of your father to the president and say, "Here, why don't you take this?"
Yeah, here.
Knowing it's on there.
And the thing is, I think there are some of us in our society who are gullible enough to buy that. It just reeks of damn emails again.
Right.
But again, we'll see where this plays out. But
that's what I was going to say. See what comes of it. It may have just come and gone, as some things do in politics.
But this is one of those things where at some point, if you're the news media, you got to go, I don't think so, because evidently they did a roundtable interview with this guy who has 4 first names, by the way, which is kind of weird to me. But anyway, I'm still hung up on the 4 first name thing. Yeah, but evidently didn't get the timeline quite right as he had told it to the Post, and there was a lot of discrepancies. So, and he's a huge Trump supporter, which is kind of weird as well. Now that doesn't mean that he's a liar or a cheater and all that. But I mean, you got to take that into consideration.
I mean, I think this is one that's it basically it's a dubious story at this point in time.
Yeah.
And I think it's got to be taken, for that fact. And if this story, frankly, was about Trump's son, dropping a laptop off, I would say the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, especially because clearly he himself has a drug problem as well, or it's alleged. I'm not gonna say that he absolutely does, but I have seen some videos and some statements that he's made while rambling on that kind of make you question. I don't know his level of sobriety.
Well, yeah, and again on Hunter Biden, or on any of the kids, if they've had past drug problems and they've rehabbed themselves, then it's a really thorny field to go down the path of anybody saying anything about them, because they've tried to overcome a terrible thing.
Yeah, but the other part of this is the big scandalous email of what oh my gosh, it's scandalous that they claim Hunter Biden set up a meeting with this executive from Burisma and the vice president. That again reeks of nepotism, which I'm against, but it's not something that doesn't happen every day in Washington. It's not something you can't point at Donald Trump and say, 3 times, because he's got the 3 kids who obviously are making money off of this. So for me, it's the hypocrisy of this is just kind of stinks as well.
Right, and look, in D.C., there are people's kids, wives, brothers, et cetera, that are in companies. This happens, quite a lot. You try to avoid the direct, contact. It happens. Staff members, I've been through it myself, former staff members, and, it's been a part of the culture of Capitol Hill. And the only way you actually can completely cut that is that if you think of a law that says if you're related to somebody serving somewhere, you can't do anything, and then I doubt that would be, legally be able to be upheld. But it just happens a lot in D.C. Always has, probably always will.
Always will.
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is.
Sure.
I want to move along. The $200 for seniors, the gift card.
Right.
We getting those? Granny going to get the gift card? Going to happen before Christmas? Going to happen before the election?
Well, Grandpa, you're talking to Grandpa. I want one.
I want you to get one.
You know, I want one, but it's not going to happen. I read that article with interest today. I'm like, okay, I thought they announced that was going to be out there before, but it's not, which baffles me. It's just another of these, I don't know, last month scenarios where you see Pompeo making statements about Iran. There were the statements about the $200, prescription card that's going to be sent out, and they're not going to get it out in time. So it's been announced, but the seniors won't receive the discount cards until after the election, and they've been promised to Medicare, recipients, and they're not going to make it in time. And I thought to myself today when I read this, I thought, how can you be at the top of the food chain in the sense of the White House and announce such a thing, and you can't make it work?
Yeah.
It baffles my mind.
Yeah, that's what I said. Granny wants that. And obviously Grandpa wants it too.
Yes.
You got the full weight of the federal government. Are you that inept? And look, Republicans tell us all the time that government doesn't work. They shouldn't do anything, and then they set out to prove it. And this is another example of their type of leadership not being able to do something simple like hand out money.
Right, and here's the other thing about it too that makes me suspicious. Ever since this has been announced, it's really not a fact yet whether the federal government can legally send those cars out.
Yeah.
Nobody's determined that.
It's crazy.
It has to be approved by the Office of Management and Budget. So just because the president announced it, it has to be approved. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, maybe it's not going to be approved, and so that's why it's not being sent out. Where they would still say, well, you're going to get it, but it's going to be delayed to after the election, when in fact you're not going to get it.
Yeah, here's the screwy part to me. I don't know why. Do you want it do you have to have it in a card? Does it have to come in a card? Do we have to contract that out to get cards, or couldn't we just say Bob Ney gets Social Security? We're going to add $200 to his Social Security next month.
Well, another thing they could do, I have to assume, with the world of computers, is that when I go to get my prescriptions, your Medicare card is in the computer system, and if I go to get a prescription somewhere and I go try to get the same prescription somewhere else, it doesn't work. The systems are tied. So if you're on Medicare, period, why could that not be an automatic computer situation where, Bob, you've got Medicare. Here's you just used $10 of your $200. Why couldn't they have done it that way?
Yeah, set up like a little health savings account.
Right. So I think it's the fact that they were hoping, or hope still, that this will happen and to be able to legally do it, and you actually physically get the card. Because if I go to get my prescription, they say, oh yeah, that was part of the Fed. Well, that's fine. You appreciate it, but if you actually get something in the mail physically in your hand, it's more of a political reminder.
That's
obviously.
what it is. And
Sure.
and that's where I was going to end on
Political
that. You got to have something with his signature on the front of it.
Right. That's just like the stimulus checks, where the letters were sent out, with the president's signature on them.
Yep.
The people.
Crazy. And finally, I wanted to ask you about. I think we had talked about this the other day. That there was going to be this great, nuclear talk with the Russians. We were going to have a great deal. Evidently, that great deal is spiraling out of control, because the way it's been reported is Putin is saying that Moscow has rejected the idea as a delusion.
Right.
Okay.
Well, also because right now Putin is in a mess. He's got three major problems, right? Three potential major conflicts going on with the old Soviet Union, the territories. Turkey's involved, on one side, the whole Armenia clash, and I don't think that Putin can afford right now to be doing anything involving talks with us. Period. He's got his hands full.
Right.
So when I saw that story, I kind of assumed even if Putin wanted to do it, this is not the time to do it, because he's trying to to get into or in or out of 3 potential conflicts, and I don't think he wants to be looking at as the guy that negotiates with anybody.
It's an interesting point. I saw it more of as he just said, you know what, I don't think we're going to give you anything because I don't have to.
Right. Right.
But I've seen the stories that he is in trouble, and
Right.
I guess there's some talk that maybe the virus is popping up again, and they're doing, I guess, not a lot about it either. So we'll see where this plays out.
Yeah, this plays no benefit into Putin's hands to begin to negotiate anything with Trump that could be viewed as a sign of, quote, weakness.
Right.
So when I saw that story, I thought, well, they might even revive Kim Jong-un talks. Who knows?
Well, we still got almost 3 weeks to Election Day. Anything
Because
is
they
possible.
have been, again, hawks on Iran. There's a lot of things that are in the news, Rick, for example, on Iran that are not getting any coverage. They're even making it beyond difficult to, get medicine to people. And they're billing it as, taking Iran on. And all of a sudden, now they're defending, for example, the Dalai Lama. He was exiled, of course, from Tibet. And now they were raising that issue with China. Well, that's been around since 1959, and all of a sudden it's being raised. So I'm just seeing a series of things. You and I talked last week. You throw things on the wall and see which one sticks.
Yeah, the spaghetti theory.
Right.
Well, we'll see. I mean, because I'm looking at the polls, and it does not look good for Trump.
No, if you look at the battleground states, in particular your state, Biden's at 50.8 in the Real Clear Politics poll of yesterday to Trump's 43. And then you go down to Michigan, 50 to 43. Wisconsin, 49 to 43. And what is most astounding about that, you've got right now on just Pennsylvania alone there, you've got 94% decided. That's decided. You look at all those battleground states, you've got very little room to shift towards Trump. So the polls are not good.
No, I've made probably 1,000 phone calls, and I think I've maybe had two or three people say that they haven't decided. And I think in talking with them, they've decided, they just didn't want to tell you.
Right. Well, I mean, normally in these polls at this time too, you'll get 43 to 46 or something like that, or or sometimes a little less. These are pretty overwhelming into the 90s when you poll the two, and that just kind of indicates I don't think anybody's shifting in a major direction, and there's not enough percentages left to shift. So that means something has to happen against Biden.
Yeah, no, you need stories like the one I asked you about before. You need something, definitely. Bob, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff, my friend.
Thank you, Rick.
Good stuff. Our good friend Bob Ney. Look, and he's right. The reality is something big has to happen, which is why Trump is losing his mind over the fact that Billy Barr hasn't come through with the Obama gate or the spy gate and all of that. So keep an eye out for the craziness yet to come, because they're going to be dropping all kinds of stuff over the next couple of weeks in the hope that something catches. Because as of now, it don't look good for him. It don't look good. Going to be an interesting rest of the week. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Hello, I'm David Philman.